Welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on the Kim B. Davis Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have Shanay Watson-Whittaker, our political strategist, and we're going to talk about policing and the African-American community. Good evening, Shanay. How are you?
Hi, Kim. Happy Tuesday. I am great. How about you? How are you today?
I'm good. It's just been a busy day, but you know what? This whole policing thing, so let me just say this. We started off, a week and a half ago, and we got a guilty verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. And we all exhaled, not rejoiced, but exhaled, because I think me, along with a lot of other people, thought, oh, he's going to get off. Mm-hmm. And then on the very same day, a young girl named Ma'Khia Bryant was shot and killed by police. And then there have been an incident, it feels like almost every day. There was a young man who called for help. I don't remember what day this was, and rode home with the police officer, got into a domestic violence incident, called the police again for help, and the same police officer that drove him home shot him 10 times as he's holding the phone talking to 911, from what I understand.
Yes.
You have another person who has been shot and killed by the police. And it looks like body cam footage again showing them having used, more force than what was necessary, or not looking at the situation, I guess, in a better light, and having killed another person. Shanay, please explain to us what is going on and how do we make sense of this, especially those of us who are moms, who have sons, we have husbands, we have brothers, we have uncles. Make it make sense.
Yes, and we have daughters as well.
Okay.
The Chauvin verdict, I think, for many of us was like you said, a sense of relief. But we know that there are 3 more defendants that are facing trial with them, and this is, and then the next day, Ma'Khia Bryant, and there's so much I want to say, but this is so common in our community. But the thing is, it's becoming well known towards the greater country. Yeah. I mean, we can go back, for me, Eleanor Bumpers. I can go back to Amadou Diallo, where he was shot over 40 times because he looked like he had a weapon and he got off. Mm-hmm. And that was in New York City. And the trial was in Albany because, less Black people there and less biases. Absolutely. And then we can talk about Rodney King. I mean, even the defense, they used the same tactics as the Rodney King trial defendants did at that time, but this time they didn't get off. And then what happened to Ma'Khia Bryant? How can I say this in the best way possible? I've seen so many people make excuses for why that little baby should have been executed, even from our skin folk. Making excuses. If you look at the video, the officer could have de-escalated the situation instead of firing first. So what it is, and what I'm learning about the training is that these officers are trained to shoot to kill Black people first.
Yes.
And with the white suspects, they want to talk him down. I mean, there was a video around the same time of a white gentleman attacking police officers and then jumping on a car and then hitting them, and nothing happened to this man. And then what happened with Isaiah Brown? He's the gentleman who called the police, and then he was shot 10 times, and thankfully he has survived. And then you have what happened with Mr. Andre Brown Jr. in Raleigh, North Carolina, and him being killed, and we're only getting 20 seconds of footage. And
Right.
that's just in a loop over and over and over again. And that, for me, just even having that snippet and not having the full video from all of the police officers that were involved tells me that there's something that needs to be investigated, and it needs to come to light, and we need an open and honest process for his family to receive justice. I mean, it's nothing, it's not brand new to us, but it's brand new to everybody else.
Exactly. Exactly. I saw video today. I've actually seen two videos today. One where these were young men who looked like they were in high school and they were in a bathroom and the police officer shot twice. And I'm hearing, based on media reports, that everyone keeps saying that the kid had a gun. However, it's come back from official investigative sources that no, the police officer was injured by the ricochet from his own gun. However, what's horrifying about the video is you see this two young men. The one who gets shot goes down, of course. The other young man who's in the bathroom is screaming and crying, please get him some help. He's
Mhm.
bleeding. He's watching this young man life essentially leave him. And, people are making excuses again, as you said, because for Ma'Khia Bryant, everybody said, well, she was trying to stab someone else's child. I want to protect someone else's child. Okay, well, we don't know all the facts. And I'm not suggesting that because she had a knife in her hand that she had a right to stab anybody. That's not what I'm saying. What I understand was happening is that she actually did call the police herself and was trying to get away from some other people that were trying to hurt her. And anyone that's ever been in a situation where you haven't been able to remove yourself from the situation and maybe had to take a defensive posture or a position, it is, once you are in that, it is hard to pull out of that for some people. And that's sort of what I thought I was looking at, is that, she was really trying to protect herself. I agree with you. Police should have done more to de-escalate it. We saw three cases. I know the case that you're talking about where the white person was lunging at the police officers with a weapon. There was
Yes.
another one that used his vehicle and the
Yes,
police
that's a
had
weapon.
locked him in and he was trying to run over police and not
Hmm.
one single shot was fired. There was another guy who was on the side of the road who didn't want a ticket, who verbally threatened and berated the police officers and then took off before they could give him the ticket. So again, we have the guy in the military uniform. I believe his name is Nazar Karian, who had nothing except his dog with him, just like you have your dog with you. And they
Yes.
do what they do. It's okay. They do what they do. And you pull me over, and before you can tell me what I'm being pulled over for, you have your guns out and you're telling me to get on the ground as if I have done something. And I saw another video today where this was in Salt Lake, I believe Salt Lake City. And it was a white guy who was pulled out of a cruiser, and the police officer started manhandling him
Hmm.
while he was getting out of the cruiser. And you could see that he had bruises and marks all over him. And then when they put him in the cell, the police dog that they had, they sicked the dog on him
Hmm.
and he was fully handcuffed. He was subdued. So, and I did watch some of the Derek Chauvin trial, and I know you said that you didn't, but one of the big things that they kept saying was, well, was George Floyd subdued? And if the training says the person is subdued, meaning that they are handcuffed, bound, under your control, whether they smarten off at the mouth or not, or just whatever it is that they're not doing that you feel like they should be doing, they're still under your control. Why do we have such the need for excessive force? I don't understand that.
I think excessive force only counts with black bodies. I know that there are white people that have been killed by police officers, but disproportionately black people are killed by the police. And then it takes me to what's going on locally. There's a training that's supposed to happen. I think it was the location that canceled.
Mhm.
That a gentleman who teaches something called killology.
Mm-hmm.
police officers that was supposed to be here in Michigan. And that he goes around and teaches police forces all over the country how to kill, shoot to kill first, and then compares the rush of killing to sex.
Yes.
And that mentality, that kind of white supremacist mentality is so in the ranks of policing in America that police for some of these people, they can't see doing anything else but killing first with black bodies. And then we can also talk about the dehumanization of black bodies
Mm-hmm.
since 1619, and dehumanization of black people since 1619. So it's so entrenched in our policing, in how society sees black people. And even you touched on it earlier, Anthony Thompson Jr., the young man who was killed by police in Tennessee because the mom of a white girl that he was dating called the police on him, and
Mm-hmm.
it said he was armed.
Mm-hmm.
So the mom later, she says she regret calling the police, but yet this child is dead.
Yes. Yes.
Did and apparently, according to the mom, the daughter had bruises on her, and the daughter says they were both fighting each other. So she called the police, and he wound up dead in Tennessee. And it was basically, it's gone under the radar for many of us in 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 the media and in general and talking about it. But that goes back to Emmett Till. I
It
mean,
sure does.
it's terrible, and using police as a weapon against black people,
Mm-hmm.
that's it's so ingrained in the society that I don't know what to do. I mean, there are calls for people that say defund the police. I'm like, personally, I'm like wary of that. I think we do need protection from people, but I get why people are for it. I get why people are calling for it. Personally, I wouldn't call for it. I think there should be an entire restructuring of policing in America, and also basically mandating that police actually live in the community that they represent.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of people swarming in from the suburbs or swarming in where they're from, places that are not uh, culturally engaged with the population that they're supposedly protecting.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. So I want to go back to something because I felt the same way when I heard Ma'Khia Bryant was killed. I thought about the young girl in Texas who I believe it was a couple years ago. They had a big swim party, and police officers showed up, and they aggressively manhandled her and slammed her to the ground. We've
Yes.
seen it time and time again with young women. We would like to say, well, at least we're women. They won't do that to us. It just happens to boys or men, and we have to worry about them. But no, it also happens to us. We see it in Florida with teachers. I believe they call them resource officers, who, if a student is getting out of line, and I've seen several videos where it's a girl, and a resource officer will literally come in, pick that child up, and slam them to the ground. I know that there was a fight in Florida, and there's a lot of stuff happening in Florida, and a police officer body slammed one of the girls who was fighting to the ground, and now she has brain damage.
Mm,
And and I'm not saying that kids shouldn't fight, but I don't know what kind of fight it was. And if you grabbed her, then that tells me she didn't have a weapon. That tells me
correct.
that she was just using her fist. However, I also go back to, in America, we handcuff and charge kindergartners with crimes because there was a kindergartner in Florida. I hate to keep bringing up Florida, who, because they were getting out of line, I guess was having an outburst, and the teacher said she couldn't handle it or wasn't going to handle it, whatever it was. They called the police. A police officer came in
Yes.
and arrested this child and put this child in the back of a squad car and said, I am going to take you to jail. Now, I believe this child was autistic or was
Yes.
having some developmental issues. And so that was part of the outburst. And I'm sure, based on what I read, the teacher probably wasn't able to handle that. But I mention all of that because we can't. neglect to mention Sandra Bland, who was pulled over, who later died in police custody, and we've never really been able to get a full story. We have Brianna Taylor, who, like Jean Botham, was minding her business. He was minding his business.
Yes.
He was at home in his apartment, not bothering anyone. And a police officer who I believe was intoxicated or was something going on with her arrived at his door and believed that it was her apartment when it wasn't, and shot and killed him because she believed he was an intruder. We have Brianna Taylor, who's lying in bed with her boyfriend watching TV, something that many of us do with our partners and spouses, minding our own business.
Yes.
And you have a raid unit that comes through. And if you haven't watched the video is hard to watch, but they go from room to room and it's very tactical once they enter. But you see the hail of bullets or you hear it, and then you see the after effects of the glass everywhere. What can we do to protect ourselves, Shanay?
I think first thing we can do is demand change in our policing, and that starts with who we elect,
Mhm,
and knowing what their priorities are, whether it's city council to mayors or townships or whatever you want to call it. They're the people who were responsible for the policing budget.
mhm,
It's up to us to organize from the bottom up rather than having those elected officials dictate to us what they think they're going to do. We
mhm,
should be telling them as voters, as citizens, how they should have their budget. And
mhm,
their budget is a reflection of their priorities. So if they're spending hundreds of $1 million on policing versus $10 million for health, there's your priority right there. And
mhm,
then, demanding accountability starts with connecting with the Justice Department. I know that the Justice Department is conducting an investigation into the Louisville Police Department as well as Minneapolis, but
mhm,
it shouldn't be just there. I mean, Columbus, Ohio, is second in the nation when it comes to child killings of
mhm.
police officers. Um, Police officers killing children.
Yeah.
So there's a problem. And there's a training problem, there is a cultural problem,
Mhm,
and there is a detachment from policing and community. Honestly, we're from what I've heard and what I've discussed with police officers, we're considered the enemy.
Yes.
So we're already being dehumanized. You
Mhm,
don't see, we're just nameless, faceless people. I mean, even here in Detroit, where we've had bad behavior by cops, where a young lady who was walking home from work and she didn't have a coat on and she was harassed by police officers rather than being offered assistance. And
mhm,
even the disrespect and the racism that officer had used at the time, it was recorded for everyone to see. So people are exposing themselves for how they really feel about us. They don't see us as people, they see us as the other and the enemy, and some nameless, a faceless black person, random black person. So it starts with, honestly, talking to our elected officials, demanding accountability, and electing people that represent your point of view and your values as well. So that's where it starts. And then again, having our Justice Department holding these police forces accountable for their actions and their culture too. One thing I just wish hadn't ended
mhm,
is where there was consent decrees for
mhm.
urban areas. And even though I live in Detroit and it's a majority black police force, there's still a culture there. I don't believe that every officer is racist, but I believe that there is a racist culture embedded in police force, in police enforcement and law enforcement.
Mhm,
So, and that goes way beyond, our existence. It goes back to the slave patrols, and I'm just going to call it how I see it.
mhm. And you're absolutely correct. I have a personal story. My grandmother lived on, or lived because she's deceased now, but at the time where she was living, there were 4 houses on her block.
Mm.
Crack had literally come through and destroyed her neighborhood. And it was interesting because her house was well manicured. However, the house next door to her was troublesome. They were selling drugs and doing all kinds of things outside of her house. So the no knock warrant that people now are concerned about has been going on for a long time. And one of the things that I learned and then I'll tell you the story, is that they make mistakes with no knock warrants all the time. Your address could be 12345 Fiddle Street, and maybe the address should have been 13245. They come raid your house and then realize later they've made a mistake. Well, who pays for that? Nobody. It's just like, oh, it's a mistake, and you should be happy that you're okay. There's a family, I believe they're in Kentucky, African American family. They were served a no knock warrant because someone said they smelled weed coming from their residence. And their residence was raided in the middle of the night. So their children were shoved outside from their or pulled from their beds because everybody was in bed and put outside in the cold and forced to lay down while they went through their house. And now they're trying to get out of Kentucky and go someplace else because they don't feel safe. My grandmother was in her 80s. I believe she was 85, maybe 87 at the time. My grandmother watched her soap operas. She called them her stories every day. She watched CBS. She was watching Young and the Restless at 12:30. She said, I was sitting here and I was watching my stories and I heard this sound, and she didn't know what it was, and it didn't sound like a regular knock.
Mm-hmm.
The police, whatever the squad is that they call themselves, had used a tool to bend her security door open and pop the lock. And then she had a solid wood frame door. They took the battering ram and hit her door. And because I was out of town when this happened, and when I found out, I hit the roof. And you could see where the battering ram had sent splinters everywhere throughout the door. So once they came into our house, you would enter our foyer. And then once you open the door from the foyer, you were in the dining room. And my grandmother had gotten up because she thought she heard somebody at the door. And she said they came in on her with guns blazing. Those were her words. And told her to sit down. And she started crying and said, what did I do? And they said, sit down. And they walked all over her house and found nothing. Meanwhile, the house in question that should have been raided was next door. The story that I was told, because once I found out, I had to go through the police officer, community police officers board. And I ended up talking to a deputy chief, and he said the undercover officer who sold the drugs to the person that they were looking for claimed that he lived in my grandmother's house. And I thought, okay, I watched 24, I watched Law and Order, I watched all these cop shows. You don't sound too bright, because if you're doing intel, I assume that you are. I assume that you're watching. I assume that you have video, something. You would see that everything is coming from that house. And when I talked to the deputy chief police officer, I said, I need you to drive by and tell me why my grandmother's house was raided. And he drove by and he said, Miss Davis, I'm so sorry. He said they hit the wrong house, but he said, I need you to know this happens more often than what you know. And I was shocked, because that means it can happen to anyone. And just as you said, we're the enemy. We're just some random Black person until we raise our voice and they realize, oh, wait a minute, she's educated. Or, oh, she works for, or, oh, they have a little bit of money and they about to sue us. Wait, we hit the wrong house. But it shouldn't be like that.
Never. It should never be like that. Everybody should be treated the same, regardless of where you're from and where you live. But that's a pipe dream when we're in this kind of society of where it's been okayed for hundreds of years. I mean, even lynchings, police were actively participating in lynchings of Black people, whether it was women, children, and men. So, this is it's so like amazing to me that people are like finally opening their eyes to this, to something that we've known, that we've been told from our parents and grandparents and great grandparents about lynching, about police brutality, even seeing it and living it for myself, seeing it in person with people I love and respect. So it's just, for me, it's the audacity of people being surprised that upsets me. but it also reinforces why white privilege is a problem and white supremacy is a lie.
Yes, yes. So let me ask you a question that I skipped over. What do you think the Derek Chauvin verdict means? And let me clarify that. He has been uh, given a guilty verdict. However, he hasn't been sentenced yet. And so we still have to wait to see what sentencing looks like. So, they got to go through some appeals and some different things. But what do you think initially? What was your thought on the Derek Chauvin guilty verdict?
I, like many other people, had a sense of relief.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like justice was served. If justice was served, Mr. Floyd would still be alive.
Hmm.
I think that for me, it's again, people being astonished that this is happening and that people are, that there's an actual defense for this kind of behavior. Seeing white America exposed to black people being hurt by the police and being killed by the police, it's not a new phenomenon, but just watching their reactions and then I hope everything's okay with you, and I hope this makes our country better. Nah, this is
Right.
what's going on. This is real. This is happening every dang day. If it's not George Floyd that's been murdered, it's someone being kicked by a cop or hurt or punched or assaulted by a cop.
Hmm.
It's kids, like you said, little baby girls, black girls, being handcuffed by police officers for just having a temper tantrum, while being autistic.
Hmm.
It's those are it's so common in our community, and people don't understand that the school to prison pipeline is real, and
Yes.
this is what's a part of that. And it's also that fear that we have as a community of policing.
Hmm.
We should not live in fear. I mean, we pay high taxes, and yet we're paying taxes for people to brutalize us. Those
Yes.
same people brutalize us and torment us, that you can't sleep at night, that when we're driving in a car and a police officer pulls up behind us, you don't know if you're going to be alive in the next few minutes. That's
Yes.
freaking crazy. It's like actual literal gaslighting on
Yes.
steroids.
Yes.
So just watching people's response to the Chauvin verdict amazes me, and it pisses me off at the same time. But I have to understand where these people are coming from. They're brand new to this, even though this has been existing for hundreds of years.
Hmm. I agree with everything you said. It amazes me because I go on Twitter and I see video from Adam Toledo, the 13-year-old child
Yes,
who was shot with his hands up, and you actually see him with
yes,
his hands up. And according to reports, prosecution said he had a gun in his hand. I said, well, where's the gun in his hand? Because I don't see the gun in his hand. I see his hands up. And other video of other people being brutalized. And people will say, well, you guys should be glad that we have police and you have to respect them. And sometimes their job is really hard. And I often think of um the her name is Kim Potter. I'm sorry, I was drawing a blank. The one who killed Dante Wright. And she said, I mistook my gun for my taser.
yes,
Now, Shanae,
yes.
you work, I work. If we make a mistake where we take someone's life, would you still have your job?
No,
Exactly.
no.
If I'm a surgeon, a doctor, any of those things, and in my position as a surgeon, I go in and I do surgery and I leave an instrument in your body, or I nick something and you get sick and die or just die, they're going to yank my license away. If
Correct.
I'm an accountant and I say, well, we have $975,000, but actually we only have 75,000. Somebody's going to say, you know what? You're fired. You
Yes.
can't do this job. Why are we allowing police officers? And I know I'm keep going around in a circle, but we keep making these excuses for bad behavior. And we're not. And as I said earlier, as I see these videos, it is outrageous.
Yes. And
The
Dante, yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say Dante, right? Just he got killed over air freshener in a
Yes.
window.
Yeah.
An air freshener. I mean,
Yes.
that shows you like their policing methods don't work. It shows you that you can dehumanize somebody and kill somebody over an air freshener. And then the police officers rallied around her,
Yes.
surrounded her house, and
Yes.
protected her house from protesters.
Mhm.
That is the epitome of white
Mhm.
supremacy.
Mhm.
That is crazy.
Yes. Yes. Just like the officers that shot Ma'Khia Bryant said Blue Lives Matter. It's caught on
Yes.
body cam. I saw it and I was like, are you kidding me? The verdict is coming down. Most people, if you worked in public relations, communications, anything, and you know that your industry is under fire, you are supposed to be quiet. You don't say things like that because you inflame tensions.
Hmm.
And it's almost like there's this flagrant, well, screw you, we don't care. Because as you said, we're the enemy. And it's sad because I know my generation, and I'm sure you were too, you were brought up to believe police are here to protect and serve. They were our neighbors, they were family members, they were people that we could reach out and touch, and we could say, oh, Mr. Davis is the police officer, or oh, Mr. Whittaker around the corner is the police officer. If we need some help, we know we can go to them. And if Mr. Davis or Mr. Whittaker saw you doing something you weren't supposed to, you were like, oh, that's Mr. Davis or Mr. Whittaker. Let me get it together because they're a police officer. They're gonna talk to me and I don't want them to talk to me. But I
Hmm.
know that they're not going to hurt me. But like you said, because police do not live in the communities, many of them, on which they enforce the laws, there seems to be this disconnect between who we see as a citizen versus who we see as a threat.
Correct. And that's what's going on all over the country. And the people who are policing don't look like the people that they're policing.
Mhm.
And
That's very
it's
true.
okay. I mean, it's okay. And one of the great things that I'm hoping about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is ending qualified immunity.
Mhm.
And that for me is it's big. And I think you have to hit people where they hurt most. It's the pockets. They're not going to respect the law. They're not going to respect the people they serve. So you
Mhm.
just hit them in their pockets. And I think that's a big step in the right direction. Will it change the culture? No, but people will think twice about shooting black folks.
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know they'll think twice.
They certainly will. Now, is it New York that is pushing legislation that says in New York that if you are fired from your job, you cannot go to another police department? They need to do
Correct.
that nationally. They need to do
Yes,
that nationally.
they do, because the cop who shot Tamir Rice was able to get a job.
Shame.
Shot a
Yes.
child, and called him a man.
Yes, he did. He called him a grown man. He said he was 25 to 35 because I listened to the dispatch or his body cam audio. And he was like, it's a 25, 35-year-old waving a gun, which it turned out, I believe, to be a toy gun. And he just was at the park playing with a gun. And somebody saw him and thought, oh, and it's funny because we went through this period, it seems like right before the pandemic or right around when the pandemic started, where
Yes.
you had white women who were reporting kids for selling lemonade. You had white people who were calling because somebody was barbecuing in an area that they didn't feel that they should be barbecuing in. You had the white lady in New York who had her dog off the leash, who was mad because the black guy said, could you put your dog on a leash while I'm bird watching? I mean, we have so many instances of people who say in the name of caution or concern, well, I'm going to call the police because I don't think you belong here. And now here we have a 12-year-old child who was almost 6 feet tall, who looked like a man but clearly was a child, and now he's dead and gone. And it
Yeah.
it goes back to the story that you talked, was it, is it Andre Brown or Anthony Brown in Tennessee?
Anthony Thompson.
Anthony Thompson, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So where his mother, instead of fully investigating, because we see it, there was a high school student several years ago who had a relationship with a white girl. He was African American, and I guess parents found out, and either she wanted to lie to the parents and tell them that she hadn't been having sex with him or something, and she lied and said he raped her. And it turned out that it was a lie. And
Mm.
this young man's life was ruined because he was sent to jail. They pulled him out of jail. But, how do you replace
Oh,
the time that he
that
lost?
was another case. I'm sorry. Anthony Thompson just happened like a couple of weeks ago.
Right, 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 right. But I had heard about that. I didn't know all the details about it. I did know it was a white girl and a black guy. I knew that. I just didn't know the details. I didn't know they were fighting, but I get that. And sometimes people have volatile relationships, not making excuses for it. But when
Uh,
police are called and you happen to be black, a lot of times the outcome is not necessarily a positive.
and it's intended to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done on purpose. White people do weaponize police.
Yeah.
These people, you've given primary examples of how they take advantage of policing. They take advantage of police brutality. They take advantage of their whiteness and and the animus between the police and Black people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's from Emmett Till on down.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Shanay, last question. If there was anything that you could reform, that you could suggest that could be done to help police better in African American communities, what would that be?
Again, making it mandatory that people actually live in the communities. That's the first step. Number two, for a lot of police communities having access to like community civilian complaint review boards. I
Mhm.
think they're big. New York has one. Other cities and states should have those review boards, and then the national registry of
Mhm.
of people who are policing who have done like heinous acts. That should be there. That's just a first step. Those are passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That's for me. Those are the big issues at
Mhm.
this time, and I just encourage people to contact their senators to make sure that it passes. I know that we have a couple of senators that are on the fence. It's about 6 senators, so it's Republicans and Democrats
Mhm.
that are on the fence. And I know that Tim Scott, the South Carolina senator, along with Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, they're talking about this and trying to make this happen. And I think they're coming from personal experience of being dealing with policing.
Mhm. Mhm. Can you give us a quick summary of what's in the George Floyd Policing Act?
Yes, that is basically creating a national database of police officers who had committed acts that were against people, records police shootings, that also creates transparency for policing in the United States. So those are the biggest things that the Justice and Policing Act does for America. It's just a matter of just getting it passed. And I know that again, there are people on both sides that are wishy-washy on that, and I'm sure that there's going to be some kind of bargaining between the two sides to get this hopefully passed.
Mhm. So we definitely encourage all of you that are listening and that are watching to call your local senator and encourage them to support this.
Yes. And
Thank
to
you.
be
Shanae.
vocal too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Shanae, for coming on the Kim B. Davis Show. Tell us how we can reach you. Tell us where we can find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm La Femme Negrita on Twitter. You can find me. You can find my twin, Bougie Black Girl. Same thing. We're both on Twitter. And if you have any questions or comments or you want to follow me, that's fine too. I'll follow you back.
Thank you, Shanae, for coming on and for breaking everything down for us. This has been a great conversation. And unfortunately, I know we'll have you back to continue this conversation because it's an important one. And it seems like every day we have a new story to talk about.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis. You know, you can reach me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and TikTok. Bachelor is spelled Batchelor. You can see this show on youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can also find out more about me, author Kimberly Bachelor Davis, at kimbdavis.com. You can also listen to this show on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. Thank you again for tuning in. We hope you'll tune in for the next show. And as always, remember, Be magnificent.